to the restroom. Welcome to our mastermind. All right, give me a little feedback on that. Do you guys like these Friday sessions? Do you like hearing from top producers? Do you find that you're getting some good value?
I do, because I think it's reassuring to hear that other people struggle in the beginning, and that it's, everybody doesn't have immediate success, but yet when you do your time and you put in the work and you learn and listen and model successful people, that you have the same opportunity to grow.
All right, class dismissed.
Thanks.
Y'all heard it. Just so true, Donna. That was very well said. Very, very well said. Everyone else is still here, right?
Still here.
Okay, beautiful. I mean, look, I this isn't about me, but I could tell you plenty of stories about how poor I was. And how it wasn't always wonderful at the beginning, right? It's a process, right? And as I mentioned to you guys before, it's knowing that this is a long-term play, and knowing that winning the day is every day. Like I've said a few times lately, am I a smarter, better agent than I was this morning? And is there anyone else in the world that knows that I'm in real estate that might contact me that wouldn't have contacted me at the earlier part of the day, right? If you can check off both of those things, then you're growing, and you're also growing the number of people that you have influence with. All right, what do we want to go over today? Any contract things? Is there another theme that you want to transition to? Are you guys noticing anything in the marketplace that you'd like to discuss? Are you having trouble with tools? Talk to me.
Yeah. Okay, I have one. Piggybacking off of last week, you said that there were 3 major contingencies. Well, there were 3 contingencies. So I'm redoing my whole presentation. I have the first 2, but I do not have the last one. So I have the financing contingency. That's the second one.
Okay. All right, so we want to review the contingency periods. Is that right?
Yeah, I have all the due diligence is first. I have the financing second, and I just wanted to make sure that I had the third one. I put it as the home sale contingency. I think. Hold on, but I don't know if I worded that right.
That's not always necessarily. Obviously, that's not a part of every contract. Let me. Okay, great. I got that noted. What else? Let's make sure that we save time for as many topics as we can. I'm sure, Ebony, that topic will benefit everyone. That'll be the first thing we start with. What else should we cover today?
Yeah, I'd like to know how appraisals work with the different types of loans.
Okay, perfect. Ebony, what was the other one?
Not to sound selfish, but with the monthly market review, you said that it's great to have the, what is it, the sales price, the original sales price slide. I don't know how to access it. Like, I'm trying to pull it and find it on
the MMO.
I guess my case.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're not going to find the MMO on MMO is for, it's not on KW, for example. So Chartmaster's MMO was sent out on November 2nd.
I have that one. I just thought that I wanted to do it. You know how I remember Robin saying that it's an interactive. I think that one, it's interactive, and I wanted to play around with it so I can get a better understanding of it, but I couldn't find where to get it other than the PDF that they sent on the 2nd.
So the PDF version is not interactive. It's the PowerPoint version that is interactive. Both formats were sent out on November 2nd.
Okay, let me look.
And you have to have Excel on your computer in order for it to be interactive.
Yeah, I didn't see the PDF. I saw the PDF. I didn't see the PowerPoint for this one.
They're both.
But I'll look. It's probably there. Okay.
Yeah, they're both attached. All right, I'm going to stand up while I describe some of that contract stuff. All right, here's the deal. And Donna, this will go into a decent amount of detail on the appraisal. You're saying like with the different loans, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I want to make sure when I'm explaining the appraisal part of the process to potential home buyers that I understand like when the buyer is responsible for paying for the appraisal, when the like if there's ever a time when they don't pay for it and someone else pays for it, and how that works with conventional loans.
Okay, so in general, I cannot think of a single example why anyone other than the buyer would pay for the appraisal. I suppose everything is negotiable, but I have never seen that negotiated into the contract where somebody other than the buyer would pay for the appraisal.
So it's always paid for by the buyer before the appraisal is done.
Correct.
In every type of financing. It's never kind of lumped into like the loan itself.
Well, when you're looking at the loan worksheet, so when the lender supplies the loan worksheet for you, it will be a fee there. But remember, that's a fee that the buyer that needs to be paid in the. Yes, the short answer to your question is yes. The buyer is going to pay for that, and it's on the loan worksheet because the lender requires it. It's paid for by the buyer, but it's for the benefit of the lender, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just saying, is it always paid out of pocket by the buyer before the appraisal is done?
Yes.
Or is that something, you know, under whether it's FHA or VA where
that should not be affected by that. The buyer should be paying for the appraisal
always coming out of pocket? Okay.
Before it happens every time. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's talk about the contract for 1 second with respect to these contingencies, okay? So in a normal contract, regardless of whether it is an FHA loan, a VA loan, conventional loan, doesn't make a difference, okay? Your typical 3 contingencies are as follows: due diligence period, financing contingency, appraisal contingency, okay? Now, remember how we talked about when we were putting together the offer, you have the general structure of the offer is pre-approval letter, okay, purchase and sale, and then you have a series of disclosures, and then you have your what I referred to as your financing document. So it's either a cash sale exhibit, a FHA loan exhibit, a conventional loan exhibit, a VA loan exhibit, a USDA loan exhibit. So you're going to have a financing document or a cash document or proof of that you're using cash, the purchase and sale, whatever disclosures the seller has provided, and a pre-approval letter. That is generally what makes up the offer. And of course, you could add in things like a cover page or a note from the family or something like that, right? Now, part of the FHA loan and the conventional loan and the VA loan, and I'm almost certain the USDA loan, although I've actually never done one, have the loan exhibit includes the appraisal contingency language. Okay. The loan exhibit includes the appraisal contingency language. All right. So all days are calendar days, and all days end at 11:59 p.m. as the clock strikes 12 o'clock the following day a.m. Make sense? Unless otherwise noted. So unless you were to say, hey, all parties agree that at 7 p.m. on the date of that would be the deadline for the contract. That way you're not sitting up at your computer at 11:50 waiting for some paperwork to come through when you'd much rather be in bed asleep, right? So all days are calendar days. The binding agreement date is a day in and of itself. The following day is day 1. The day after that, of course, is day 2. All the time periods run simultaneously. Okay. Due diligence period, I've seen it as low as no days, but generally on the resale market, you see it, I'd say about 7 days on the low end and probably about 12 days on the high end. It normally ends up being around 10. Okay. I'll explain all the things in just a second. financing contingency and appraisal contingency, those generally end up being somewhere between 21 and 25 days. Okay. In a perfect world, the buyer would prefer those time periods take them all the way to closing. Okay. The seller doesn't want to show up for, wake up on the morning of closing and then say, hey, just kidding, home didn't appraise, or hey, just kidding, I changed my mind on the financing, or I can't get the loan. Sorry about that. So the seller wants the time periods to be as short as possible. Buyer wants the time periods to be as long as possible. What we find is the roughly 10 days on the due diligence and roughly 21, 24 days or so on the financing and appraisal is enough time for the buyer to do what they need to do and the seller to feel reasonably protected. Make sense? Okay, so let's just let's walk through a scenario where the due diligence period is 10 days. Let's start with that. Okay, now home goes under contract, binding agreement, let's say, is on today, November the 6th. Okay, the following day, November 7th, is day number 1. If you had a 1-day contingency, it would be up the following day. That's how you can kind of remember it. Okay, now the due diligence period is the first of the major contingencies. This is your opportunity, or really the buyer's opportunity, to do any type of research that they would like to do on the property that they haven't already conducted. Okay, let me list a list of the things that are most often evaluated. Standard home inspection, a radon gas inspection. If the home has a septic tank, maybe a septic tank inspection. If the home, I would get a termite inspection or a WDO inspection, wood destroying organisms. It's not just termites. There's about 5 or 6 different organisms that can be pretty catastrophic if they have invaded your house. A pest control company or termite company can come over and do those tests. Usually those letters are around $50, $45 to $50. Okay. A radon inspection is generally around $200. Sometimes I've seen it a little less if the home inspector does it also. Sometimes the lowest I've ever seen, it's like $150, but it's usually around $200. Okay. Let's see. If you see anything that is problematic, right? If the inspector says, hey, those beams on the deck look a little weird, then you might say, hey, let's call a structural engineer and get some further evaluation, right? Those are generally the primary thing. Or if they say, hey, that thing looks like mold, maybe you have a mold company come out and look at it. Okay. So those are generally the topics or the inspections that somebody would have.
What
Okay.
about built before 78? What do you do for lead-based paint?
That's a tough one. I personally have never been a part of a transaction, several hundred transactions, never been a part of a transaction where either party tested for lead-based paint. Okay. The tests are pretty expensive. They take a long time to do. I've actually never seen any seller say that they have any test results of a positive test or that they have any knowledge of lead-based paint. The buyer is fully able to test for it, but I've never had a buyer do that before.
And Bill, sorry,
Yeah.
and is asbestos the same thing, I guess, right? For asbestos, you never come across people wanting to test for that, for like materials in an older home that could possibly have asbestos in them.
Generally, the home inspector would be able to identify something that they thought was potentially problematic.
Okay.
And if so, then I might have another company come in and do a custom test. Like I've not seen a whole lot of asbestos like insulation, but they used to use this asbestos-based tape on to secure like piping around the HVAC systems. So sometimes you see that. I haven't seen that.
Sometimes like tile and floorings too, old 60s, 50s.
I've not been involved in anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, really the lead-based paint, and look, it's, if you want to kind of a bit of a scary read, you could read the EPA's guide on that. Okay, it's a very serious matter. However, it really is with ingesting, right? So like if the paint is, you know, peeling, yeah, it probably needs to be tended to. Does it mean the home's a wreck? No, it just needs to be tended to, right? Um, if, you know, if the child's going to be eating, you know, playing with the thing, and then they get the paint underneath their nails and they put their fingers in their mouth, yeah, it could potentially be a problem. But it's kind of, that's what you get when you're buying an 1850s ranch, right? If it hasn't been painted since the 50s or 1978 and it's not been properly encapsulated, then you may have an issue. Look, it's up to the buyer. I've not made a unique situation out of that before. Okay. All right. So those are your general home inspection topics, or inspection topics. Okay. Now, what happens is I'm sorry. The other things, of course, that the buyer should be doing that are not inspections, if you will, but things that I think are super important are, number one, they need to make sure they've done the commute. Okay. I don't want them driving from, you know, Midtown to Alpharetta for the first time from their brand new place to work and then realizing the commute's no good, right? If you haven't figured that out already, then now's the time. Okay. You need to work with the commute. Okay. I also believe you should be checking the sex registry list to make sure that there is, you're aware of anyone that's on the sexual predators list or whatever, that may be something that would be of concern to you, right? If it is, you should be aware of it. If it's not, you should be aware of it. So check the registry list. Not you, you tell them to do it in writing, right? The other thing that I think you should look into is school statistics, right? If that's important to you, demographic work, if that's important to you, right? You need to pretend like you own the home. So anything that you could potentially learn about that would cause you not to want to own this home, this is your opportunity to do that research now. Okay. If you want to make sure that the right type of people live in that area, then stand by the stoplight in front of the neighborhood and see what you see, right? If it's not an area you know that well, you know how you can get a good idea of who lives near you? Go to the local coffee shop, go to the local bank, go to the local grocery store, see who you see. If you don't like what you see, you may not want to buy that home. Make sense? Let them do that research. Okay. I was told very, very early in my career, Bill, some people like salmon and some people don't like salmon, right? And my point is you just never know what somebody is going to be attracted to. And the power tower in the backyard could freak somebody out. And I have a client who bought a home with a power tower in the backyard. I said, does this bother you? He said, no, man, this is awesome. It's like, I'm a runner. I run all day in my backyard, all around the cleared path. This is fantastic. I'm like, all right. Right. I have a client who's closing on Sunday or on Monday. Somebody died in the house. The previous owner passed away in the house. That freaked me out. Doesn't bother him one bit. You see what I'm saying? So that's, I'm a little off topic right now, but so those are the inspections. That's the research that the buyer should be conducting. For any reason whatsoever that they want to leave the contract between binding agreement date and the expiration of the due diligence period, they are free to leave the contract without cause. It does not have to be inspection related. They could find a different property. They could change their mind. Okay. They could leave for any reason. Okay. They don't have to give the agent's explanation or the seller explanation or anything. It's basically a free look period. Okay. More than likely what's going to happen though, is they're going to get the home under contract. Then they're going to allow all the people that need to come into the home to evaluate it a chance to do so. Then what's going to happen is, give me just 2 seconds. I'm sorry. They're going to all give you reports back. and you're going to huddle with your buyer and say, hey, is there anything that you've now learned about this property that is problematic to you? Would you like to renegotiate, or would you like to fill out a document called the amendment to address concerns? The amendment to address concerns will say something of this nature. Seller agrees to hire a licensed professional to make certain that the following repairs are done and provide all receipts to the buyer within 5 days of the date of closing. Number one, seller agrees to hire a licensed plumber to replace the toilet on the upstairs bathroom in the hallway, and to fix the leaky drain or whatever. Okay. Number two, seller agrees to hire a licensed electrician to change the ampage on the circuit breaker or whatever, right? I usually do not put like page number 17, picture A2. I don't reference the what do you call it? The inspection report in the amendment, okay? Because then the lender will want to see the inspection report, and then they'll find a bunch of stuff that they want fixed prior to the home getting closed when no one had a problem with it to begin with. Okay, so I don't need that hassle. So leave the inspection report references out of the amendment to address concern. Okay, so and it might say, let's say for example, you would specify what a professional needs to fix and maybe what it doesn't really matter. So for example, it might say like, seller to make certain that the big, tree log is removed from the backyard. I don't really care who does it. Just get it out of here. I don't need like a licensed tree company to do it. Just cut that crap up and get it out of here. Make sense? Okay. Another example of that might be like, let's say somebody to fix a doorknob or something. If it works, that's all. There's nothing special about a doorknob. It either works properly or it doesn't work properly, right? But somebody who, like a HVAC contractor, I don't want like Uncle Steve to come over and fool around with it. I want a real HVAC company to come around. You see what I'm saying?
Electrician, you want to be code electrician.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then a series of renegotiation happens. So the seller might say, yes, everything as written is perfect. We'll take care of all of that. Great. Now you have an amended contract and you keep moving forward. Or they might say, we'll do number 1, 2, 8, and 9, but everything else we're not doing. And now the buyer knows that given the condition of the home and what the seller's proposing for a amendment to the contract, meaning what they're willing to fix and what they're not willing to fix, I am comfortable moving forward as agreed upon. If the answer is yes, then you just sign off on the amended contract. And if the answer is no, then you have the ability to leave the contract without penalty. Now, you will not get any of your inspection costs back, right? But you will get your earnest money back. So as long as it happens within that time period. Yes, sir.
No, so if you have 5 things in the amendment to address concerns and the buyer and the seller only wants to take care of 3 of them, is there an amendment to the amendment to address concerns, or is there some sort of a document that
an amendment would imply that you're amending something that has already been agreed to. So I say that to say that if you propose the amendment to address concerns and they amend it, really what they're doing is just countering it. So you're not actually executing the version 1 and then amending version 1. You just haven't gotten to the execution phase.
Got it.
Does that clear that up?
It does to me, yes. Thank you.
So that would just be kind of considered a counter offer, if you will. Make sense? Okay, so if for any reason the buyer is unsatisfied with how the process is going up until the moment before the due diligence period ends, that person can unilaterally leave the deal without penalty. Okay. If you hired a termite company, that money's long gone. If you hired a structural engineer, that money's long gone. Make sense? Okay, simultaneously, same time periods are going with the financing contingency and the appraisal contingency, okay? When the deal goes binding, in my opinion, the buyer's agent has the responsibility of sharing the full executed contract with the lender. Let's start with the lender, okay? So the lender, if you don't know the lender, by this time you definitely should have spoken to the lender. right? They should know who you are. Hey, we got a, Donna. Hey, John's looking to borrow some money. He's under contract, or he wants to go under contract with 123 Hill Street. Want to make sure me and you know how to, we know how to reach each other. Do you have any questions for me? I want to run a few things by you, et cetera. So by this time, you definitely know the lender. So you're going to share all the contact information, all the contract information, the bound contract with the lender, and they begin to put together what's essentially called the loan package. Okay, so they're asking the borrower or slash buyer, give me your tax returns, give me your pay stubs, give me your letters of explanation. We're going to run your credit. Give me a blood sample. I mean, it's gonna feel pretty intense. Okay, and you might want to prepare your buyer for that, right? Look, the lending process is going to be a little intense, and here's the reason why. Okay, you're buying a $300,000 home and you're putting up 10 grand. The other $290,000 is coming from somebody else. So all the due diligence and research and stress that you've got, they've got 29 times that. So they're going to ask some questions too. So don't be surprised if they come for a stool sample. They're not going to come for a stool sample, but don't be surprised. Okay? Like if you don't like their questionings, then you don't get their money. All right? What do they say? Whoever's got the gold makes the rules. If you want the gold, give the man the answer.
Golden rule.
If you don't like the questions, then go find somebody else. Go get the money from somewhere else. Make sense?
But I'm sorry, wouldn't a lot of this have been done in the pre-approval process? So when you...
Yeah. But now that they have a contract, they're kind of putting the package together, so to speak.
Okay.
Because now they're going to get it off to underwriting, and underwriting is going to start evaluating the file, coming back with a conditional approval, satisfying the conditions, all of that. By the time 21 calendar days elapses, they should have a what's called a conditional approval. A conditional approval will basically say, yeah, we just need to double check John's employment status right before closing, and we need September's bank statement, right? As soon as we get, and maybe proof of insurance or something. So as soon as we get those things, we're good with the loan, right? It's more than likely not going to be a full clear to close approval by the end of the due diligence. By the end of the financing contingency. But I want to at least that file to have gone through underwriting once, so that we can determine if there's any major issues. Because if there are, we need a denial letter so we can get out of the deal without penalty. Okay, we also are going to make sure that a closing attorney has the file, because the closing attorney needs to do their research, which is largely title checks, right? They're going to make sure that they can pass along a valid title insurance policy to the future buyer, and they're going to, if the home's part of the HOA, they're going to double check to make sure that no money is owed or any of that kind of thing. They're going to clear the title, and anything that's owed, like if let's say they owe the sewer, the county, $100 for a past sewer bill, that's going to be settled up. They owe the electric company some money. There's a materials man's lien on the property, all that tax lien, all that's going to be settled up at closing, right? Maybe somebody died and didn't get this thing signed. All that's got to be dealt with prior to the closing. Okay, so the attorney's doing their work. Meanwhile, you are keeping your buyer sane and negotiating through any type of inspection related issues. The appraisal is also happening. Okay, so let's go through a little bit of the appraisal discussion. Okay, this is a third party opinion of value of the property. Okay, for a VA and FHA loan, they are not just evaluating the value or the opinion of value of the home. They're also making sure that they're also making sure that the home essentially fits the standards for an FHA or VA loan. Those standards are generally health related and or safety related. Okay, the big red flags that I tend to see on lender required repairs from an FHA or VA loan: active moisture issues, active roof leaks, active roof issues, not like somebody didn't cover up a nail hole properly or shingles loose. I'm talking about like they go inside and there's a big stain on the ceiling, they're gonna have a problem with that. Okay. Handrails that are not on stairs or decks. Clear electrical issues, like let's say you got like live wires that aren't capped coming from the ceiling or something. Broken glass, that's a big one. They got a big issue with broken glass. You know, even if it's just a back window that's broken or something, that oftentimes they're going to want that fixed before funding the loan. Trying to think of obvious signs of mold, right? They're going to want that addressed before they issue a loan. Okay. So on the FHA and VA document, there's something that says the seller will pay blank number of dollars towards any lender required repairs. I will usually put somewhere around $1,000 in that line, unless I've identified some other things that are really problematic, and then I'm going to bump up that number. If the appraiser comes back and says, okay, value's fine, but we got to fix these couple of things here, the seller is basically pre-negotiated to fix the first X number of dollars worth of problems. Once you go beyond that number, you got to reconvene on who's paying for it. Okay. I haven't seen that too much. That used to be a huge problem 10 years ago when the market was terrible and no one had any money. Okay, I don't see that too often anymore. Okay. On conventional loans, they're not looking around the property like that. It's typically a straight value issue, not a necessarily condition issue. Okay. Now, this isn't one person's opinion on that day at that moment. And it's not somebody who's trying to sell the house, and it's not somebody who's trying to buy the house. So they're doing the exact same analysis that presumably you've already done with the buyer, to say, okay, here's some homes that you could have chosen from, that you could have chosen. Here's the pendings nearby. Here's the recent sales. You're evaluating rough prices. Okay. Let's say we have a home that's under contract for $300,000. Okay. You got three options. Okay. Appraisal comes in at 310. You're fine. You moving on. No further discussion. You are under no obligation to share the number with the buyer. If you're on the listing side, you would just call the buyer's agent and say, we're good on the appraisal. Wait, I'm sorry. Back up. If you're on the buyer's side, you are under no obligation to share the appraisal with the seller. Meaning you don't have to send them the appraisal that says that somebody thinks it's worth 310 when you're only paying 300 for it. Okay. You just call up the listing agent and say, we're good on the appraisal, moving on. Okay. If the appraisal comes in low, which is anything shy of 300, then you would submit the appraisal to the seller with a document called the amendment to reduce the sales price. And you would say, I'd like for you to reduce the sales price to, let's say, 290. Let's say it comes in at 290. Okay. If the seller agrees verbatim to lower the price to 290, and keeping everything else in the contract exactly the same, then you are now obligated to buy the home at 290 and you moving forward. Okay. If the seller says, no, I'm not lowering the price, then as long as everything happened within the appropriate number of days, then this buyer can do a couple of things. They could leave the contract with no questions asked and get their earnest money back. They could try to negotiate some kind of blend of something that they could get closer to their way. Maybe, well, would you pay half? Right? And I'll come up with the other half, like some form of negotiation. Or the seller could, or the buyer could say, well, I appreciate you trying. I know you're not going to lower the price to 290. We'll keep the price at 300. However, I still really want the home and I believe it's worth 300. So let's say it's a 20% down loan. So 20% of the 290 will come from the bank. 80% of the 20% of the 290 will come from the buyer. 80% of the 290 will come from the bank, and 100% of the $10,000 difference will come from the buyer. So the buyer is able, although not obligated, to bring the shortfall, the difference between the sales price and the appraisal number, to the closing, and the lender will be fine with that. but they're under no obligation to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, at this point, we're probably around 3 weeks or so from the binding agreement date, and somewhere probably between 1 and 2 weeks away from the closing. Okay, so now we've satisfied the due diligence period, we've satisfied the financing contingency, we've satisfied the appraisal contingency. At this point, we're just kind of monitoring everything on the loan side, we're monitoring everything on the attorney's work, we're monitoring everything on the repairs that were agreed to be done. You know, we're probably helping the buyer set up their utility accounts and, these, find movers and these kind of things. And then ultimately you start getting some final estimates from the lender and you sit at the closing table. Okay. Now, you're under no obligation to, as a seller, to agree to these 3 contingencies, although you almost always see them. And you're under the, I'll give it, let me see if I can think through an example. Let's say that in a perfect world, this is a bit of strategy, you would prefer to have the inspection buttoned up by the time you order the appraisal. What I mean is, let's say there's a laundry list of stuff that you want sorted out as a buyer. What needs to happen, or it doesn't need to happen, I shouldn't say it that strongly, but ideally you want to make sure as a buyer that you know what the condition of the home is going to be at closing, meaning like what of that stuff is going to get fixed before you spend another $450 into the transaction for a home you don't even want, right? Meaning, let's say I'm the buyer and I submit a list of 15 things that I want the seller to fix. And as the seller's going and finding their vendors and getting prices and all that, the appraiser calls the seller and says, hey, this is ABC appraisal. We just got an order from the buyer and we'd like to come by at 10 a.m. tomorrow. As a listing agent, I'm like, well, damn, I guess they don't want all that stuff all that bad because they just dropped another $450 into this transaction. So I think I'm going to say no to all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, ideally, you want to make sure everything is strategy, right? In a perfect world, get the inspection stuff handled, then order the appraisal. And not every lender thinks like this. So you need to, hey, look, I'm in charge here. I don't want you ordering the appraisal until I tell you. Are you clear? John, I'm really serious about this. Do not order this appraisal until this inspection is done and I tell you it's done.
And you have the ability to set that timetable with the lender.
Well, you're not setting the timetable with the lender. You're technically setting it with the contract. But then you're going to the lender and saying, this is what I need from you.
Okay.
So they're really under no obligation to, they just need the appraisal ordered as part of their process. A lot of times they don't really care. They're not thinking about strategy.
But you can tell them, hey, put off the appraisal until next week, or this is when.
Look, don't order the appraisal till we talk. You clear?
Isn't the appraisal ordered by the buyer though? I mean, it's not ordered by the lender.
It's technically, it typically is ordered by the lender and paid for by the buyer.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
So the person that puts in the order, so to speak, that's done through the lending department, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But they get a credit card number from the buyer.
That's how it worked with me.
So even when it's conventional, the lender orders it?
Yeah, lender always orders it. It's for the lender's benefit.
Yeah.
It's not even really for the buyer's benefit. It's for the lender. The lender wants to make sure the collateral is worth what the buyer's willing to pay on it, or what loan their LTV they're willing to give. And I'm really particular about this. Like, look, I know I can come across like an asshole sometimes, but this is a big deal. John, don't order the appraisal until I tell you. Are you clear? Okay. If you don't play by my rules and you screw it up, we're done doing business. You clear? Now, I'm not going to generally say that to somebody, but That's what I'm meaning in my head.
Protecting your buyer. You're saving your buyer money. You're protecting your buyer, but with that attitude, of course,
Right.
you have to think of your buyer first.
Right. Okay. So, okay, let me think of if there's any other topics I want to go over with respect to that. Oh, another thing sometimes you'll see is that in a highest and best, you tighten up some of these deadlines or these contingency periods, right? So you might go from 12 days to 10 days to 6 days, 7 days for a due diligence period. But at that time, you need to be on the phone with your inspector saying, hey, can you get out there tomorrow? Right, I'm going to have to go to a 6-day due diligence instead of our normal 10. How fast can you get out there? How fast can you get me the report? Right. So you might be having to do some stuff behind the scenes to make sure that that is still a possibility, right? You also might consider, like when I bought my home last year, I got rid of the appraisal contingency because I was trying to do everything in my power to avoid having this home go public. I was trying to buy it off market. And I knew that the home was in good enough shape. I wasn't going to fight him over a backward electrical outlet. And so I wasn't particularly worried about, and I knew I wasn't going to get much anyway, right? Because he was selling it off market. He's not going to, we're not going to cut and paste the inspection report and he's going to fix it all. I was pretty much buying it as is, more or less. And so I got the appraisal right away. So I still got the appraisal and it still had to work, but I got it back before the end of the due diligence period. So I didn't have to have another contingency in place and he didn't have to wait another 11 days to see if he was going to be able to sell this home. Does that make sense? And the house before that I bought, I happened to get rid of the financing contingency. I got rid of the financing contingency because I'm a what do you call it? A 1099 employee or a 1099 person. Like my pay stubs were, not my pay stubs, my commission checks were already in place. Like I knew that I made enough money to afford the loan, right? I wasn't worried about losing my job, right? So like that was a risk I was willing to take on. So it's all a function of what risk are you willing to take on. Does that help, Ebony?
So Bill,
Yes.
I have a thing. I just want to bring it to mind because I got kind of caught up in it. And I tried to talk about this in Ignite. I'm not sure Melba really understood it, but if you're doing like a sell and then a buy followed, with your seller, you're going to buy. Be careful of your due diligence dates because I sold a property and the guy asked for 2 weeks of due diligence and I knew I had to get out. And then I bought a property and my due diligence fell short of his date. Like it ended before his due diligence date. Okay. And I would be very careful because he pulled out and I ended up owning 2 properties because he pulled out after my purchase due diligence finished.
Yeah.
And I would have either lost my money, my earnest money, if I had walked away. And I just had to go on faith that I would be able to sell that first property. So I owned 2, very uncomfortably owned 2 properties for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is if you're trying to buy and sell at the same time, you need to be aware of when your negotiation ability or when your contingencies expire on each of the home, on each of the transactions, so you don't get stuck. Great point. Okay. I'm gonna call it a day today. I've got to run to the next meeting, but I'm super grateful for you guys. I hope today was very valuable for contracts and for contingencies. I hope you got a lot out of your meeting with Jay. You guys enjoy your weekends. Make sure to enjoy life outside of real estate. Go meet some people. Go get to be a smarter agent. Get some rest, and I'll see you bright and early on Monday. Okay.
Thanks. Have a great week.